Hi everybody, Ray Deck from Skookum Kids here with an update for you about foster care generally and our operations specifically, and a bit of a look forward to what we expect in the next 6 to 12 months. This video is unlisted, which means nobody can see it unless they have the specific link. Consider it eyes only. Feel free to show it to your family and your church leadership, but not beyond that, because I'm going to get a little more specific than I usually do in public. One of our values at Skookum is transparency. From the beginning, I've been more candid than many nonprofit executives about everything, the needs and our goals and the state of the effort. But I feel a need to share with you in a little more detail than would be appropriate in a fully public setting. COVID-19 has had a strange effect on foster care, and we're feeling it in two big ways. First, for the last month or so, all parent-child visitation, which is called family time, was suspended by executive order. And there are good reasons for that, but nobody was happy about it. Parent-child visitation is critical to the emotional health of both children in foster care and the biological parents who are walking a long, hard road to put their family back together. Interruption in the one chance these families have to spend together each week is devastating for many of them. Now, we saw this coming, so we acted really early to set up the technology and systems that would facilitate visitation via video conference. And we were a first mover on that. In fact, when the executive order was issued, we'd already been conducting remote visitation for a couple weeks. And that's a credit to the Skookum staff and how seriously they took the plan making when it was just a hypothetical, and all this madness felt like it was a really long ways away. Since we had it worked out so early, we actually had the opportunity to teach a number of other visitation providers how to do remote visits, and that was a great honor. Second, when kids went home from school, almost immediately we saw a 50% decrease in the volume of concerned phone calls. That is, when someone calls 1-866-END-HARM to report suspected child abuse or neglect. In Washington State, we average about 900 calls a week, and when schools closed, that dropped almost instantly to about 450 calls a week. A higher percentage of those calls are of the most urgent nature. Usually about a third of concerned phone calls result in an investigation that is immediate. Anytime, day or night, go out and look right now because a child's safety is in danger. But during COVID, it's actually almost half of the calls that are resulting in these high urgency investigations. The same thing, this decrease in volume, but increase in the percentage of high urgency investigations happens every year in June when kids go home from school. But it's not as though COVID is preventing child maltreatment. It's not doing that, but it is preventing the reporting of child maltreatment. So in other words, to put it pretty grimly, kids are being hurt in quarantine and it is going unreported. As we look ahead to the end of this bizarre season, things potentially returning to normal, many of these instances of abuse and neglect will be reported and then investigated, and likely when children return to school in the fall. And that's going to create a condition in which we will see a sudden, very sharp increase in the demand for all aspects of foster care in late August to October, which then should level out by the end of the year. So at Skookum, we're doing everything we can to prepare for that. That part, everything I just shared, is not a secret. I've been talking about that everywhere that I can for the last week or 2 weeks. But here comes the less public part of the update. Combine that with what's happening in state government right now. Last week, the Office of Management and Budget issued a memo directing all departments to plan on a cut to their budget somewhere between 10 and 20%. That's based on expectations of a revenue forecast that's due out in June that is likely not going to be very pretty. I've been on several conference calls with both the Division of Children, Youth, and Families, DCYF, and some of our sister agencies to talk about what to expect. You know, the people in the know are saying, plan on this being worse than the cuts that we experienced in 2008. Now, I wasn't around then. I lived in New York at the time. Skookum wasn't founded until 2014, but we have several partners who lived through that, and many of them, frankly, were part of organizations that don't exist today because the '08 cuts put them out of business. I was just on a call yesterday, actually, and the chief of staff at DCYF explained that the preliminary thinking in DCYF leadership is that they would prefer to wholesale eliminate what they're calling non-core programs rather than do an across-the-board sequestration, and cripple everything. And when he said that, our lobbyist texted me and said, I think he's talking about you. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, I'm hearing that emergency shelters and foster parent support are two of the non-core programs that DCYF could zero out funding for. So, hold those two facts in your head at the same time. We're likely headed for a situation in which, a whole year's worth of children enter foster care in a 75-day stretch this fall. And all of the money that DCYF pays to agencies like Skookum might get cut in a special session over the summer. So we're obviously feeling a little anxious about that. But let me temper it for you somewhat. First of all, Skookum has way less exposure to this situation than many of our partners. Most of our sister agencies receive somewhere between 80 and 100% of their funding from government contracts. Skookum has 4 contracts with the state of Washington, and together they amount to approximately 30% of our funding. So, for us it's scary. It's exactly twice as financially significant as the loss of funding we experienced late last year. But even if the sky does fall, we have a puncher's chance, and some of our sister agencies just flat don't. Second, Skookum is arguably in the best financial shape it's ever been in. It's been a very crazy 9-month swing on that front. We're debt-free. We're still growing. Year-to-date revenue is up 132%, despite having canceled a number of events. And we're quite lean. The shortfall situation last year prompted us to streamline a few things that, even though we're bigger now, our payroll burden is actually lower than it was a year ago. This is a very complex problem set ahead of us for the remainder of the year, but we're in a pretty ideal position to attempt to address it. So what are we doing now? Well, 3 things. One, we have extracted a number of concessions from DCYF about licensing, things that are going to make it easier for us to license and train foster homes in the age of COVID. So we're hustling to license as many families as we can, while everything else is quiet, so that we are ready for the autumn. 2, after a short closure to get ourselves kind of organized, we have reopened the emergency shelter at Skookum House. That was a decision I was not planning on making. I expected the house to be closed for the duration, mostly because, if we had a confirmed case at the house, the best response would be to quarantine a small number of staff in the house with the children for 2 weeks. And I didn't want to do that. That felt like too much to ask of this crew who have already given a great deal. But a small number of staff approached me and said, basically, we want to do it. Open the house. If it comes to it, we will quarantine there, which is a really brave and moving thing to decide. I actually, to be fair, the bargain they struck was, if there's an outbreak, we will quarantine in the house, but you have to promise to bring us takeout once a day, which felt fair. So that's the deal that we struck, and the house is open, and we have a plan if there's an outbreak. And 3, it is more important than ever that our community relationships remain strong. Maybe you don't realize there is nothing else in our state quite like Skookum Kids. The combination of people first values, broad community support, And a heart of innovation is really something special. So if you guys are with us, I really like our chances. If you've got a pledge of monthly support, thank you. You are one of about 200 people, 200 reasons why we've got a chance that our peer organizations don't have. And if you've been following along and supportive of what we do, but you haven't made a pledge yet, we'd love to have you. Come on in. The water's warm. And frankly, if you're getting this, as a representative of a community like a church or service club, I would love to update your community on what's happening at Skookum. I'd make a video like this for you. That's a little shorter and maybe less detailed, but does largely the same thing. Updating members on the state of foster care. That's what we're looking at for the next 6 to 12 months. If you have a specific question about foster care generally or Skookum specifically, I'd love to chat. I'm at rd3@skookumkids.org. And I'd love to hear from you. Thank you, once again, for your ongoing support of kids and families. It is safer to be a kid in Whatcom County than it is in many places, largely thanks to you and your generosity. So thank you for that. Be well, and I hope we're together again in person soon.